Good afternoon, all. On behalf of IoT Academy, we welcome you all for the first session of National Level Faculty Refresher Program on Teaching, Learning, and Research in HAIs. Let me introduce the resource person of today's session, Dr. Rupali Ahluwalia. She is the Assistant Professor and Head, Department of Commerce, St. Aloysius College, Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh. She has teaching and administrative experience of 18 years. She has completed postdoctoral fellowship from ICSSR and doctoral studies in international trade relations. Dr. Rupali is the recipient of 2 gold medals from former President APJ Kalam for her outstanding performance in post-graduation. Her areas of expertise include research methodology in social science, NAC assessment and accreditation, and quality initiatives in higher education. She has completed 2 research projects, authored 2 books, published chapters in books and research papers in various national and international journals. She also holds membership in various administrative committees. We welcome you, ma'am, and with this, we hand over the session to Dr. Rupali. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, ma'am. And a big congratulations to you, IoT, for organizing this faculty refresher course. I understand it is a 10-day faculty refresher course, and it is addressing a wide range of topics covering the areas of higher education, its teaching, learning, and research aspects. So I think together, by the end of 10 days, all the participants who are a part of this refresher program, they will have some expert understanding of these important and vital areas of higher education. So let's hope that this first session that we are going to begin today, which is based on your core of higher education, that is teaching and learning, we are able to come out with concrete points which are useful to the participants in their specific areas of teaching and learning. So my concern today is going to be that I have been asked to speak on teaching learning practices, innovative teaching learning practices. So that is what I'm going to be taking up. But as we move towards, the presentation, I will just share the presentation with you. And then, so effective teaching techniques is what we, are expected to talk upon. But during the course of our discussion in the next 1 hour, what I will try and bring home to you, or what I will try and make you understand, is the fact that telling you that, teach like this or teach like that may not be very helpful. If I tell you that, lecture method is now not very, effective, you have to use different methods, that may not be very, very significant, because that is something which, you can search on Google also to find out what are the effective teaching techniques. So my purpose here in the next, 1 hour that we will be here in the session is going to be that we focus on some fundamentals, or you can say the roots. If we are able to make changes or make some improvement in the roots to which, teaching is attached to, I think effective teaching techniques that we are looking to find out, or innovative teaching techniques, will automatically be the result. So it is just like when you are trying to plant a tree, and if you focus on the quality of the seed, the tree will definitely be a healthy tree and you will have good fruits. So that will be the outcome. So, but if you focus on getting the good fruits without focusing on the quality of the seed, then the other way around, it will not work. So that is what we are trying to understand, that to be able to use, or to be able to be innovative in your teaching techniques, it is important for us to focus on the very, very fundamental aspects, or the root aspects involved in teaching and learning. So in the next few minutes, we are going to focus upon teaching techniques which are more student centric, because any teaching technique, you may be thinking that it is innovative, it is effective, but if that teaching technique is not student centric, and you are not making the student participate in that teaching method, then somewhere the result or the fruits that we talked about may not be very, very effective. So, the primary or the fundamental thing that we need to understand is that for our teaching methods, it is important for us to tick mark these two, that are our teaching methods, center with the student as the center, are they student centric, and are we making the students participate in those teaching methods, or it is the other way around, it is teacher centered, and we have prepared our matter and we are trying to teach. So this is the fundamental area that we are going to be focusing upon while we are discussing the teaching practices. So teaching practices to be most effective actually should be student centric and they should be participative. Now, let us begin with this one word that you see, that is education. So can you see the slides changing?
Yes, ma'am. It is
Oh,
visible.
okay. So, education, since all of us come from higher education, we have our own thinking about, higher education, or how we understand higher education, or how we define the term education. Now, education may mean, a lot of things. If one or two of the participants would like to unmute and let me know what comes to their mind when they think or when they see this word education. What is the first set of thoughts that come to your mind when you look at this word education? Now, on the screen, education is written. What are the first few lines or the first few thoughts that are coming to your mind when you look at education? If one or two of the participants can just unmute and we can discuss, it will be very nice. Any of the participants? When you look at this term education, according to you, what are your thoughts? What comes to your mind? So I think it's a silent or set of participants. So education normally, there are different ways that people respond to education. That means that some will say that it is training or making your students learn something, or some will say that it is a process by which we are imparting the required knowledge to our students. Some will say that it is a way by which we are making our students ready for the future. So there are different responses normally that people have, those who are a part of education. When they look at the word education, this is what is their general thought on education. But firstly, I would like to specify that if we can say that education, when you look at the word education, for me, the simple meaning of education is just learning. That is a fundamental way that we need to look at education, that education may not be attached only to a degree, education may not be attached only to a certification, or until you don't attach yourself and get a certificate or a degree. In the general societal parlance, we say that you are not educated if you don't have a degree or if you don't have a certificate. We say that this person is not educated. So that is a small shift that we need to make. Firstly, that education is simply learning. If as teachers of higher education, we are able to make this small way of change in the way we think about education, I think we will be able to take it to our classrooms. That if our students are learning something new, that may be a little beyond the syllabus, that may be not in the boundaries of what their exact book is requiring them to learn, but if learning is happening, I think we are on education. Like if you don't know how to cook, if you are learning to cook, that is education. If somebody doesn't know how to drive a four wheeler, they are learning, that is also education. So this is a change that needs to take place in the way we look at education, beyond only certifications, beyond only degrees. And when we do that, we will see that education will become more complete. And education, when we say that it is only learning, then it means that education is not about molding the learner. the way you want them to do, but it is about organizing their natural longing to learn. So if I say that in my class, if my students are doing this, if they are able to do this, only then they are good students. Otherwise, they are not, on the right path of learning. I, as a facilitator or as a teacher, my role is that if I am able to uh, have my students move towards learning, everybody has a natural trait to learn. If we look at small kids, you will find it difficult to stop them. They want to know what is happening, how this is happening, why this is happening like this. They will try and find out everything. We have to tell them not to touch this, not to do that. So that is an indication that there is a natural longing to learn, and that is how humans have been built. So learning is something very natural. We don't need to force learning, because just like you feel hungry, you feel thirsty, similarly you have this feeling to learn new things, to know about new things. So there is a natural longing to learn. So as teachers, first we need to understand that every student, or for that matter every human being, has a natural longing to learn. And this means that it is a natural trait, just like feeling hungry is a natural trait, feeling thirsty is a natural trait. So similarly, learning is also something very, very natural. Now when you are hungry and you get a good meal, how do you feel? You feel happy. When you are thirsty, you get something nice to drink, you feel good about it, you feel happy about it. Similarly, when we are saying that learning is something which is natural, it should not be forced, then it is our responsibility as teachers, as academicians, to ensure that learning is a joyful process. Firstly, that your students are able to find that joy of learning when they come and learn from you. So this is something that we need to change in the way we look at education, that education is simply learning. And just like other traits, if you observe a small child, you will find that learning is a natural trait. It is a natural process. And when it is a natural process, how should it be? How should it happen? It should happen in a way which makes your student feel pleasant about it, or makes your student feel joyful about it, rather than creating stress, rather than creating a feeling of fear, anxiety. If I don't know this, this will happen. So that is a way in which the thinking about education needs to be. And since we are the academicians, it is our responsibility to be those change makers. So as we just discussed that this is a natural process, so how should what should our role be? We should be able to guide that natural longing to learn. We should be able to provide aid to our students so that they are able to move ahead in their learning. And we should be able to help them that they achieve whatever goals they have set for their learning paths. And so it is important that we say that we are more of facilitators rather than teachers. So this is a commonly used term. Many times we say that teachers are facilitators, but we only say. It is very rarely practiced in most institutions. It is very rarely practiced in most states. So, as teachers, I think it is important for us to understand that we are more of facilitators, and when we are able to facilitate learning, which is something natural, I think the entire system of education will see a change in the way the teachers approach teaching and in the way the learners take their learning responsibility. So, this is the first thing that we need to focus upon when we talk of innovative teaching techniques, or practices which are effective. So practices can be only effective when we say that education, when we believe that education is natural, and something which is natural should happen in the most pleasant form. And if with this mindset we approach our teaching learning process, there will be a change in which in the way in which we look at our teaching learning process. Now, the next thing that I would like to draw your attention to is not a technique as such, but you can say it is, like a rule book. When you talk about religious books, you say a particular religious book is the be all of a particular religion. Similarly, if we talk about, teaching practices, or if we talk about how learning is happening, it is important that all of us should be aware of what the Bloom's taxonomy had given way back in 1956. It may sound that it is, a very old kind of a taxonomy, but this is, as I told you, one of the most important pillars, that if we as teachers have a good understanding of this taxonomy, we will be able to use this as a very effective tool when we are planning our teaching methods. So you can see that, the Bloom's taxonomy, which was given in 1956, is, as I told you, it is a taxonomy or a tool which we can use. If we have a good understanding of this taxonomy, we can use this as a tool to make our teaching practices effective, and it will happen naturally again. As I told you, if the seed is good, then the plant will be good, and so will it bear good fruits. So similarly, if your fundamental understanding of pillars like this, and one of the pillars I say is Bloom's, is strong, automatically it will translate in the way you are teaching, in the way you are managing your class, in the way you are managing topics. So the 1956 Bloom's taxonomy, as you can say, is in the is a shape of a pyramid, and what you can see are different levels of understanding. So this entire triangle, or the pyramid, so to say, is divided into 6 levels of understanding, and it starts with the very, very a broad base of knowledge, where you can see that there is a large space which is given to knowledge, where we give knowledge to our students. It may be based on the syllabus or the course that is prescribed. So there is a broad base that Bloom's taxonomy focuses upon in terms of giving knowledge to your students. Then it moves ahead and it tells that you have to have that the students are able to comprehend or are able to understand whatever we are trying to give to them or offer to them in terms of knowledge. So the next level of the Bloom's taxonomy is given as comprehension. Now, after giving them, or transferring them the knowledge and ensuring that they are able to comprehend or they are able to understand, the next thing is, are they able to apply it somewhere? Are they able to make use of it? Are they, beyond just passing an examination? Are they able to use it? Next, are they able to make analysis out of it? Are they able to synthesize it with something? And are they able to make something new out of it? Or are they able to evaluate what they have learned and what are the findings of what they have learned? So this, what you see, is a 6 level pyramid of Bloom's taxonomy, which is primarily dealing with the levels of understanding. If I say that this Bloom's taxonomy is basically telling you levels of understanding. So levels of how your student should understand when you take up a class or a unit is what is given in Bloom's. So this means we will take this further. We will look at the other versions of Bloom's, but to tell you that this is actually the levels of understanding that Bloom's taxonomy is actually telling us. So levels of understanding would mean that when you take up a topic or when you take up a unit, are you able to attach any one of these levels to the topic? Are you simply imparting knowledge in that topic? It may be only imparting knowledge, there is no harm. Are you trying to understand, make the student, analyze that topic? Say if you are teaching, if you are teaching energy resources. So is your student able to distinguish between, the renewable and non-renewable resources? So that means that they have the capacity to analyze. So this basically is something that we as teachers need to be clear ourselves, that what is the level of understanding that we intend to offer to the students when we take up a topic, or when we take up a chapter, or when we take up a unit or course in our classes. So this is what primarily the 1956, that means the original Bloom's taxonomy, actually focused upon. Then later, in 2001, it was seen that when Bloom's is used tool in your teaching learning practices, it does give you very, very good results. That means I know that today I want only my students to understand. I don't want them to reach to the level of analysis. I don't want them to reach to the level of evaluation, because that is not the objective of my uh, you know class today, so, or the chapter that I am dealing with. So it is important that we understand that that Bloom's is a very effective tool, and this was understood across the globe. And that is why further in 2001, Anderson and Crothwell, Lauren Anderson and David Crothwell, they further made an improvement in the Bloom's taxonomy, and you see that your knowledge became remember. So basically, Anderson and Crothwell revised Bloom's taxonomy by attaching action verbs to the levels of understanding. That means what I want my student to do. So at the very basic level, it is still a pyramid. If you continue to look at it, it is still a pyramid. You see that knowledge has become remember, comprehension has become that I want my students to understand, then I want my students to apply, I want my students to analyze, evaluate, and then create something new. So in 2001, what was done to Bloom's taxonomy by Anderson and Crothwell was that action verbs were attached to the taxonomy, so that as teachers and as students, I know what I want my students to know, and my students also are aware that they are expected to reach that level of understanding in that particular chapter, topic, unit, or course. So in 2001, this was the improvement that was made on the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, basis our discussion, if I look at a traditional course design, if I tell you that you need to design a course maybe on digital marketing, or maybe you need to design a course on biotechnology, what comes to your mind first? What comes to your mind first is, what are the topics, what is the duration of this course, and what are the topics that I need to cover in this course, so that my student covers these topics. So the traditional approach to course design, if we look at what we just discussed upon, the Bloom's pyramid taxonomy, was that what are the topics that I need to cover, what are the interrelated topics, what are the subtopics. So it is basically a hierarchy of topics that come to your mind when you are asked to design a course, say on digital marketing or biotechnology. Topics come to your mind first. Now, with this approach, what happens is that you think that your student who wants to learn digital marketing or take up this course of biotechnology is an empty vessel. You have these topics, and you are going to pour those topics, and that empty vessel will be filled with knowledge, say in the area of digital marketing or in the area of biotechnology. So your topics were translated, and those topics filled the empty vessel of your, the brain of your student. And then the common scenario that most of us are confronted with is that knowledge has been transferred. You have, say, you have listed 10 topics to be covered in this digital marketing course. Knowledge has been transferred. The student has attended the class and, said that, okay, all the topics have been done. But what happens is, where to use this knowledge is the central question that the student is faced with. Apart from passing the exam or getting a certification or a degree, where do I use this knowledge is the most fundamental question that is missed and is not addressed or remains unresolved. So what happens normally is this exam pitfall. This scenario, so now that knowledge was transferred into the empty vessel and the empty vessel got filled. So we thought, the knowledge has been transferred. But the gap that happens is that the student is now a little confused that beyond my examination, where do I use? So what happens is, all the 10 topics and you have given them all the notes, and then you give them an assignment, or you take an exam, and when the papers come back, you say that the student has not performed well at all, and they have not performed as per your expectations. So your experience and expectation do not match. That we come to know, when there is an exam. So that is why it is termed as an exam pitfall. During the exam, after the exam, we say, oh, the students did not do well at all. I explained them everything. I was so clear. I gave them all the notes, and topic wise, they were given everything that they required, but still they did not do well. So the missing link here is that in the levels of understanding, if we look at Bloom's, the shape of the pyramid is indicating that there is a broad base of remembering and understanding, but then there is very narrow space or a small peak, so to say, that you see here, that there is a very small space or opportunity that we are giving to our students to move on higher order thinking skills. And most of the time in our teaching practices is focused on lower order thinking skills, where we are mostly captured, or we are mostly caught in making the students remember and at the most make them understand. We do not uh, have those opportunities, or we do not plan such activities in our classroom experiences where we actually make our student to apply what they have learned, or to make them evaluate, or maybe to create something new. So that higher order thinking opportunity is not given in most teaching practices or classroom scenarios. And that is why what happens is that you made your students to remember and understand, and then when you ask them to answer a question, they are not able to answer. So the simple thing that we need to understand is that if you look at the learning maths, how does it work? If you give your students say 70%, they will capture 50%, they will understand 40%, they will retain 30%, and in the exam you will get 20%. So that is how the learning math actually works. So to be able to make a change in this, what we need to do is that give them the opportunities to towards higher order thinking skills of not just focusing on remembering, making them remember or making them understand at the most, but to give them the opportunity to analyze, evaluate, and create. So this, if we look at Bloom's, the pyramid that we were just talking about in the last 20 minutes, uh, can be re-looked at. Now we need to change the lens in which we look at Bloom's. Now, not that Bloom's is only, a pyramid. A Bloom's taxonomy can be taken up in the shape of a wedge. Wedge means that you have a broad base of knowledge, of lower order thinking skills, of remember, understand, and apply, but you also give them a lot of opportunities and ample time and space in your classroom experiences to be able to analyze, evaluate, and create something new. So this means that both the lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills, a proper balance has been, maintained. You have struck a balance between the time and opportunity that you are giving to the lower order thinking skills and the higher order thinking skills. So if you look at Bloom's in terms of a wedge and no longer a pyramid, that means we look at Bloom's with a different lens. We change the way we look at Bloom's. So what will happen is that you will see this transformational journey from the original Blooms to the Anderson and Crothwell, where you had action verbs attached. And after attaching the action verbs, if in your classroom teaching you are able to look at Blooms in the shape of a wedge rather than a pyramid, indicating that we are giving a lot of space, time, and opportunity to both lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills, I think there will be a change in the way now you look at a course. Now, if I ask you after this discussion, what is going to be, if you were to design the same course of digital marketing or biotechnology, how would you design the course? Your first thought that comes to your mind is, when these students complete this course of biotechnology or digital marketing, what do I want them to learn? Do I want my students to be able to create some ads, or do I want them to, be creative in terms of making their own digital marketing? So what I want my students to learn is the first question that comes to your mind. Then, what are the ways in which I'm going to make that learning happen is the next question. And then you look at the topics that will help your students learn whatever you have said. So, this is a new approach that we need to adopt whenever we are dealing with chapters, courses, or topics. That in this topic, what is it that I want my students to learn? Do I want them to move to the level of understanding only? Or do I want them to move to the level of analysis, maybe to evaluate or create something new? So, this understanding, this fundamental understanding, is very important that we as teachers build this understanding and use Blooms as a very effective tool of making our courses ready in terms of the levels of understanding, of what are the levels of understanding that I want my students to achieve. So I think if you look at this, transitional journey from a pyramid to an action verb to a wedge, and if this is used in your planning of a particular unit or a topic or a course, you will see that there will be a lot that you will plan in terms of activities, in terms of assignments, in terms of teaching techniques. It will happen automatically. It's kind of a default setting. You know, if you program your teaching experience like this, innovative ways of dealing with that topic will be very automatic. So that is something that is the first thing that we need to understand when we talk of innovative teaching practices. The next segment we will be discussing on something very very important, that is adult learning principles, which are, again, as I told you, that Bloom's taxonomy is like a rule book for academicians if they want that their teaching practices are well planned. Similarly, adult learning principles are also very vital. Have you ever, we are all dealing with college students, most of us, and they are all adults. They are, above the age of 18. So, have you ever thought, how do adults like to learn? If you were teaching, say, a kindergarten or, a primary student, there are different ways that they like to learn. Like in kindergarten, it has to be more of, fun and more of, there are other things that you need to cater upon. But have you ever thought that your adult learners who are beyond the age of 18, how do they like to learn? So it is very important that we spend time and think what are the ways in which adults like to learn, just like, a kindergarten student likes to be, taught in a playway method. Similarly, how do adults like to learn? So that is a question that we need to understand and focus upon. So for adults, they need to know the why. So if you think upon what, how adults like to learn, it is important that adults want to know the why of a topic. Why do I need to learn this topic? Okay, it is in your course, you have to appear for an exam, that is, that is there. But then why do I need to learn that topic? Why is it important? And what will it help me to do? So these are the three, vital dots that I need to connect for my adult learner. If I am able to connect these vital dots for my adult learner, you will find that they will have value for your learning experience. They will value your class. They will value the topic that you are teaching. They will value the course that you are taking up. So it is important that we connect these. Why do I need to learn this topic? Why is this important? And what will it help me to do to add value to the learning experience of my adult learners? Now, when you say that you are adding value, you are making your learning experience or your teaching experience valuable to the student. That means you should be able to meet their needs, their learning needs. You need to be relevant, and you need to help them achieve their goals. So that is when your learning experience will become valuable for the student. And it is very important, in adult learning principles, it is very important that we need to understand that all adult learners want respect and to be seen as capable learners. When you look at a kindergarten child, that child wants, a lot of love, care, affection. But adult learners, they want respect and they want to be seen as capable learners. You cannot, be an effective teaching practitioner by telling your adult learners, oh, you are not good at this, oh, you cannot do this, oh, you are not good at this because you are not able to do this. So that means you are somewhere trying to tell the learner that they are not capable, and that is how it will not work. The fundamental principle of adult learning principles, the core value is that the adult learners want that they are respected and they are treated as capable learners. When this happens, only then will you be able to hook them to your class. So you need to offer them, the choices in your learning. You need to make them accept responsibility for their learning, and you need to make them aware of the progress that they have made. If they have made progress, they should be known, they should be made known that they are progressing. If they are not progressing, then you have to tell them, that this can be the consequence. So making your adult learner aware is very important. So that means that as per adult learning principles, you need to create an environment. And what is that learning environment? To C stands for the conducive learning environment that you create. R, that means your learning environment needs to be relevant. If you're teaching something which is age old, not relevant now, definitely there will be no value attached to your learning experience. Then you need to encourage your adult learners to accept their responsibility. You need to make them aware of their progress, and if they are progressing well, you need to make them feel that they have accomplished something, and then you need to ensure that their learning needs are met. So this means that you need to keep these vital aspects in place, and create a learning environment where your adult learners are there with you in your learning environment. So these are vital points which the adult learning principles help us to focus. Now, coming to teaching experiences, uh, when we as students, if we are asked a question, that if we were asked to recall a particular class or a particular teacher, which is that teacher or which is that class or which is that topic that comes to your mind that you still remember was taught to you in an interesting way or in a memorable way, or it still has an impact on you? So, normally what happens is that if I ask you a question, that if which is that teacher that you still remember that they taught you this topic, or the way they taught you the topic. So for example, one of my physics teachers, they taught us surface area, and how that teacher taught surface area was that in a cup of water, in a cup there was warm water, hot water rather, not warm water. So hot water was poured in that cup in the class, and then few students were asked and told to put their finger in that hot water. So most of the students were reluctant. They didn't want to put their finger because they knew that the water was hot. Then that teacher transferred some water from the cup into the saucer. And now when the students were asked to dip their finger, they, there was no hesitation because they knew that now, it is in the saucer, so the water will not be that hot. So they were ready to put the finger. So then that teacher explained that this is surface area. This is the impact of surface area. So there are ways in which we can make our classroom experiences vivid. That means our students will remember them even, when they come of age, and they are memorable and they have an influence or impact on that. So it is important that we present with impact, whatever we are trying to present. It cannot happen in every class, but in topics where there is practical experience which can be possibly given, I think it is important that practical experience is given to the students, so that they remember, or those learning experiences become memorable for our students. So since we are all teachers, it is important for us to understand the impact formula. Impact formula means there is a Moravian formula which tells you that 55% of what you are saying or whatever message you are saying, so 55% of the impact of your message comes from the body language. How convinced, how energetic, or how involved you are in what you wish to teach. So the impact of your message, 55% of it is contributed by your body language. 38% of your message or whatever you wish to teach depends, the impact comes from the tone of your voice. That means, if you are in one tone, if you are going like a monologue, after, the most intelligent students will withdraw their attention. The students who are a little notorious, in the first 5 minutes they will sleep, and the others who are a little interested, maybe they will take 15 to 20 minutes, but then they will also withdraw their attention. So 55% is your body language, 38% is the tone of your voice, and it is only after you are able to surpass these two percentages, 7% is the impact of your words. So this is something that we need to be aware about, that preparing good content is just a very, very small aspect of good teaching. The body language, the tone, the level of involvement that you are showing with the topic is of utmost far greater importance than actually the content. The content is important. You cannot be talking anything and expecting the students to learn, but then your body language and your tone are far more important and have a greater impact as compared to the content. So basis on this, there is this small presentation structure that we can use in our class. We can break our class into, these three segments. You can see two triangles in the corners, and in the center you can see a square. So basically every class in our minds as teachers, we can picture it in the form of this infographic that you can see. So in the first small segment is the opening segment, when your aim is to get the attention of your students. Then in the center, which is, the major part of your class, that is the body of your class, you explain the topic that you wish to explain. And the last segment is closing. That means your class is going to come to an end. So closing will mean call them to do something based on what you have explained. So these are, the different segments that we can use as a basic structure to make our classes, interesting, and also that they go in an organized manner. So in the opening part, we try to get the attention of our students. In the center, we take up the actual topic that we wish to teach. And in the end of the class, we ask them to do something. So how can opening of the class be made interesting? So that means that in the opening, if you start with something, with maybe a small quote or a short story, or maybe, a compliment or some interesting data, your students will listen carefully. So in the opening of your class, our major objective is to hook the student. You understand how a hook works? The hook attaches itself, whatever object you put on the hook, the object gets attached. So in the opening, we need to, take the role of a hook, that we need to hook the student. So that can be done by maybe a compliment, a quote, or some interesting stories, or some important data pertaining to the topic that you are teaching. And as a result of this, you will find that now, since you have hooked the students in the opening of your class, the next aspect, that is the square that we discussed, that is the body of the class or the topic that you wish to teach, you will have their attention with you. Here, you can use student-centric techniques, uh, you know, to, as we discussed in the very first slide, that any teaching practice to be effective has to be keeping the students in the center rather than keeping yourself in the center. If the students are the center, then this middle section, that means the actual body of your class or the meat of your class, You need to adopt certain student centric techniques, and you can use maybe question answering or demonstration or case study. So this is a Google image which I will not discuss much, and that is why in the very outset I told you that I will not be discussing on methods, because Google does it very well for all of us. So we will not discuss time on this, but these are a variety of student centric techniques that can you know uh, help you to deal with the topic or the body of the class. What we will discuss is some important student centric methods, and one of the most important, believe me, is questions. Asking questions is actually one of the most important ways in getting your students involved into your class. If you ask them questions, after some time they will get involved in your class, and it will create a participative environment. When you make them a part of what you are doing, they are involved in what they are doing, you will find that their attention is far more better. So, and it is important that we focus as teachers on the types of questions that we are asking. In the beginning, we must start with good questions. Now, what do good questions mean? Good questions mean that in the beginning, don't ask questions which have a correct answer or an incorrect answer. Because in the beginning, our main purpose is to make the student, get them involved. So if there is a correct answer, then the student who knows the correct answer only, they will get involved. The others may not get involved because they don't know the correct answer. So you should give questions where the students are asked to share their opinion or share their idea. That means they are at a minimum risk point. If they are incorrect or if they are correct, doesn't matter, but they will be involved. So it is important that the types of questions that we use in the initial part of our class are very important. Questions which are going to involve our students. Later on, we can move to, factual questions which have correct or incorrect answers, and some response generator questions where you ask your students to give you some examples pertaining to a topic or what do they mean. Then there can be some nudging questions. That means that in addition to what you have taught, what are their comments, or what is the idea that they have about that topic, or their opinion based questions. There can be prospective questions also, like we discussed the levels of Bloom's. If you ask your students to analyze something or maybe to synthesize something, then you need to make the right kind of questions for them. That means the prospective questions. Like, for example, if you are taking, banking, then you tell them that since now COVID-19 has gone and impacted everything across the globe, so how do you think the banking system has changed post COVID? So this will help, these perspective questions will help them to analyze, will help them to synthesize what you have taught them in a particular topic. Then there can be action-based questions where you ask them to do something based on what you have taught them, and you may help them. So these can be ways in which questions can be used very effectively to deal with the body part of your class. Like we discussed in the opening part, our focus is to hook the student. Similarly, in the body part of the class, our objective is to make the topic, to make the student involved, to get the student involved, and questions can be a way in which we get them involved. The other way is demonstration. So this is a very famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, which tells that tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, but if you involve me, I will learn. So if you tell your student something, it is most likely that they will listen and they will forget. If you try and teach them, they may remember, but if you involve them in the learning, then actually they will learn. So demonstration is one way that is very effective in terms of creating innovative teaching practices. So demonstration can be done, either you tell them and they will do. So there are different ways in which the instructor tells and does, means you actually demonstrate and you show them, or you simply tell them and the students will do. Depending upon the subjects, this may change. So that is why there is no specific way that can be described. But depending upon the subjects, students, demonstration works as a very effective tool in involving our student. Like if you wish to teach them maybe center of gravity for regular and irregular objects, so one way would be to take up from the book and read this is the definition, and the other way would be that you just do a class activity where you take a ruler, which is a regular object, and a spoon, which is an irregular object, and you ask students to get up and try and balance them on their finger. So you will actually find that the students will be able to balance the ruler well, whereas the spoon will fall off. So then from there, you can use this demonstration as a way to explain to them why the center of gravity or the midpoint is important in the concept of center of gravity. So this is one way of explaining an important concept. Or maybe if you are explaining or if you are teaching them about money, what you can do is that you can like here you can see that there is a list of items given, and you ask them that what according to them is money, what may not be money, and what is definitely not money. So you can see account, saving account. So I what I'm trying to tell you is that different subjects will have different approaches. If you're dealing with maybe pure sciences, your approach will be a little different. If you're dealing with social sciences or humanities, your approach will be different. But then these are some ways in which demonstration helps your student to stay involved and connected with the topic. So after this activity, then now if you explain to them the key characteristics of money, then they will learn it faster. And as we were discussing the class structure or the presentation structure, the first was opening, the second was body, and the third is, close, or asking your students to close, when you are closing the topic. So here, one very important way is call them to do something, and this can be done by chunking. Now, chunking is a very effective technique where I divide larger, learning syllabi into smaller chunks, where I divide larger learning material into smaller chunks, and that also in a systematic manner, so that my student is able to learn. Let us look at, how this works. I will just give you a small demonstration. Supposing if I tell you that, there is this number on the slide, there are some digits that you can see. If I tell you that you how many digits were you able to remember? Now the digit has gone from the screen. So how many digits do you remember? You can type your answers in the chat box and show. But what will happen is that primarily there will be only 4 to 5 digits that you might remember, because it was just a number that was presented to you. So, some will remember 4, some will remember 5. And if I ask you to recall those numbers in sequence, that will not happen. So again, if I show you a set of number, now what is the difference between the first and the second? In the first, they were just numbers in one order. Now here we have made batches of 3. We have grouped them or chunked them into 3. Now it will be a little easier to remember 154, 879, 653. Maybe you may remember 7, 9 or 6 numbers. So what has happened is that now if I tell you that how many numbers were you able to recall in sequence, now this time maybe your response will be a little better. You will be able to remember more numbers because they were grouped, they were chunked. Although this was random chunking, they were just grouped into different number sets of 3, and you were able to remember them easily. Now, so putting these your learning material into small pieces is actually called chunking, and chunking as a technique works very effectively because your students, you have divided the entire thing into small bits, and that becomes easy for them to understand. Now, if again I were to work on that same, now here there are, instead of numbers, there are digits, but then again there are three digits. So there is random chunking going on. So now if I ask you to remember, maybe you will remember a little better. You will remember this a little better. But if these alphabets that are shown here, if they are rearranged, and this is rearranged like this, the dog likes to run. So this is systematically chunked material. Systematically chunked material. Now I don't need to ask you to remember, you will remember it automatically. So this is just an example which has been used And to tell you that chunking of your material, of your teaching material in a random and then a systematic manner facilitates or improves greatly the way your students learn. So this is something that we need to look at when we, look at a syllabi, or when you look at some chapters. You need to understand how you can systematically chunk the material of that course or that subject. So this works very well, and we will skip this. And we will come to last part, that is assessment. It is important that once you are done with teaching, you focus on assessment, and assessment may not be only written tests. Assessments could be self assessments, it could be peer assessments, it could be portfolios of your student, how they, what they knew before and what they know now. And later it could be also in the forms of exhibitions of what they have learned. If they've learned something and they've made something, then assessment could be in the form of exhibitions that can be put. So assessment is an important part of innovative teaching practices. Without that, we ourselves will not be able to evaluate what our outcome has been. And lastly, feedback of what you have taught. Tell them to focus on the highlights of what they have learned, highlight the areas of improvement that they want, validate what what they have observed, and then keep it brief. That means whatever we need to make them understand, or whatever we need to give them, has to be very concise and brief. That does not mean that we do it in short. That means that over repetition of the same content again and again. It can be done differently, but the same thing again and again kind of takes away the interest. So feedback is an important method that we need to use in the end to evaluate how teaching goes. So that is all from my end that I needed to say. So I think we are well on time. And in case you have any queries, I will be happy to address them.
The session is open for discussion now. You can unmute and interact with the resource person, or you can post your questions in the chat box also. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
So if there are any questions, you can let me know. There were some responses in the numbers. I thank Anu and Rupali for responding when we were discussing random chunking. So you could see that, there are few numbers only that you are able to remember. So if there are any questions, you can let me know.
Dear participants, you can post your questions in chat box also. I will, ma'am. PPT and the recorded sessions will be sharing in the group. Dear participants, do you have any questions?
Yes, I think Mr. Vijay Girish, there is a hand raise.
So, do you have any questions, sir? Vijay.
I think your mic is mute, so if you want, you can post it in the chat box.
Any questions, participants? Ma'am, I think there are no questions from their side, ma'am. Shall we wind up, ma'am?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Sure.
On behalf of IoT Academy, we thank Dr. Rupali, ma'am, for the enriching, enlightening, informative session. And we thank you for the amazing and excellent presentation, ma'am. And we thank you for enhancing our knowledge with the commendable presentation. We thank you very much for your efforts, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
I
all.
thank, I thank all the participants for joining the session today. Kindly submit the feedback form using the link that has been posted in the chat box. Thank you all. Have a great day. Please submit the feedback form using the link that has been posted in the chat box. Thank you all.